So, today we're going to be diving into the heart of your workout with an essential guide to heart rate zones. Understanding these zones isn't just about pushing harder, it's about training smarter to meet your fitness goals efficiently. Whether you're looking to burn fat, improve your endurance, or maximize your performance, today we'll explain how to use heart rate zones to get the most out of every workout. So, strap on your heart monitor and let's dive in. So, welcome to One Strong Southern Girl. We're a digital health and wellness brand for women who exercise at home. We've been sharing unbiased, honest reviews of the top programs, products, and services for home exercisers since 2016. I'm Mickey, one of the founders, and I'm so glad you're here today. Let's get started. Heart rate zones. So, what the heck are those heart rate zones? Here are the questions I'm going to be covering today. The main questions: what is maximum heart rate? Also known, when you see the MHR, that's what it stands for, maximum heart rate. Number two, what are heart rate zones? What are the heart rate zones? What is the fat burning zone versus the cardio zone? And I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about heart rate monitors. And just for anyone who doesn't know me that well yet, I am a PA, physician assistant. I have a little bit of a background as far as medical goes. I have some medical training and to back up some of this information. Was also a former personal trainer as well. I didn't use a lot of this kind of stuff with clients in personal training. And honestly, it doesn't come up a whole lot when I see patients in the office either, but I do understand this kind of stuff. So I'm happy to explain it to you guys because it is nice to understand it, and it can be confusing for sure. So we got to start at the beginning. What is your resting heart rate? Your resting heart rate is the number of times your heart beats a minute when you're at rest. So a good time to check what this is for you is in the morning after you've had a good night's sleep, but before your first cup of coffee, because coffee and movement and all that will raise your resting heart rate quite a bit, especially that cup of coffee. So if you want to know what your resting heart rate is, a good time to take it is first thing in the morning when you get up. And the thing you need to know is everyone's heart rate varies a lot. For most people, the average resting heart rate falls somewhere between 60 and 100 beats per minute. That would be considered normal for the average person. However, an athlete or more active person can have a resting heart rate as low as 40 beats per minute. And there are people that walk around, anyone listening to this right now will probably be able to identify one or two people they know who aren't athletes but walk around with very low heart rates. So there are some medical conditions that put you in an incredibly low heart rate zone, but there are some people that just inexplicably have very low heart rates. And so most of this information I'm going to share with you, and most of the information when you Google this and start looking it up, is all based on averages. And so if you fall way outside of the average, then some of this information you're just going to have to adapt the information or adjust it to fit you. But for most people, the average resting heart rate is going to be somewhere between 60 and 100 beats a minute. So what is your maximum heart rate? Also known as that MHR that we see all the time. Your maximum heart rate is roughly 220 minus your age. Now, again, this is one of those things that if you look it up online, if you Google it, which go for it. I actually recommend you do some of your own research when it comes to this kind of stuff. But your maximum heart rate, the method most people use to calculate that is this one right here. It has a name for it. I can't remember what it is, but this is the method most people use to calculate your maximum heart rate, 220 minus your age. However, there are probably at least four different ways of calculating your maximum heart rate that are a lot more involve a lot more math and a lot more calculations. And so this one's the easiest one to deal with, and it's the one most commonly seen, and the one I'm going to be talking about today. So by definition, maximum heart rate is the maximum number of beats made by your heart in 1 minute of effort. So what is target heart rate? And this is all going to come together in just a minute. Right now, I'm just laying the foundation for some of the basic definitions that you need to know to understand how all of this fits together. Target heart rate is generally expressed as a percentage, usually between 50 and 85% of your maximum safe heart rate. So if your maximum heart rate is 175 or 172, 180, whatever, your target heart rate is going to be a range that's 50 to 85% of that maximum. So target heart rate is not one number. It's a range, typically between 50 and 85%. So when you see that, phrase what's your target heart rate, it kind of depends on what someone's talking about. You actually need that. If they just say target heart rate, they're expressing a range, but that's 50 to 85% generally of your maximum heart rate. But I'm going to show you in just a second you can be more specific about that. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Okay, so here is a great little chart that from the American Heart Association that kind of shows you in general where you fall in how you can calculate your average maximum heart rate, depending on where you fall in this age range on this chart. And again, like I told you, the target heart rate zone is a zone. It is a range, 50 to 85% of your maximum heart rate. So target heart rate, that alone, to me, it's a very general comment, hard to do a whole lot with it because it is so general. It hits all the zones because I'm going to show you my next slide. There are actually 5 zones that are more specific that break down that range of 50 to 85. And they all fall in your target heart rate zone. So that's actually a little bit easier to understand. So the 5 different heart rate zones are what fall within that 50 to 100% heart rate percentage. So what is the point of knowing what zone you're in? Why would someone even care? It helps you track your fitness progress. That's why people commonly want to know what zone they're in because it's a way of tracking and monitoring how well you're doing. So if you have a very granular fitness routine, then you might set a goal of training in each zone for a specific amount of time. And I'm going to show you what those zones are in just a second. And again, those zones all fall in that 50 to 85% rate of your maximum heart rate. So you might hear someone say, this over the next week. So you guys know that I recommend that you create your workout calendar with program stacking, tons of variety, changing intensities during the week for total body conditioning. And this right here is another reason that it's important to change intensities during the week because you will naturally be training in those different heart rate zones by changing your levels of intensity. Boom, right? Nice benefit without even knowing it. You've already been doing it. So here are the 5 heart rate zones. Zone 1 would be in that 50 to 60, the top zone, very light rate, heart rate elevation above your normal. And then you can see it gets more extreme as you go through the zones. And zone 5 being the highest heart rate, closest to your max. Zone 1 being the lowest perceived heart rate, lowest perceived exertion on the scale between 1 and 5. And so you can see using this chart how that relates to the one I showed you earlier, where, see, this breaks down the entire range, whereas that first chart that showed target heart rate included all 5 of those zones inside of it. So when you see that phrase target heart rate, it's really so general, it's not very helpful, honestly, because it depends on what zone you're trying to get into. And if they don't break down those zones for you, it can be incredibly confusing. I hope that makes sense for you. I hope I'm not making it even more confusing for you at this point. But these are the 5 zones that are within that you're approaching and moving into as you move towards your maximum heart rate. So, fat burning zone versus cardio zone. What the heck are people talking about? What does that mean? So the fat burning zone is generally the zones in the lower the lower heart rate zones of your maximum heart rate. So that's in zones 1 and 2. So let me remind you, zones 1 and 2 right here. So 50 to about 70% of your maximum heart rate would put you in what people like to call the fat burning zone. And the cardio zone, I'm about to show you on that slide, that would be zones with 3 and up. Okay. Generally zones 3 and 4, but anything above zone 3, or once you hit zone 3, you're in the cardio zone. The cardio zone, like I said, is generally zones 3 and up. So I want to stop for a minute and tell you a word about that fat burning zone that people get so hung up on. What the heck? Why do people do that? And I want to explain to you, it's kind of misleading that people are like, they want to be in this fat burning zone because they think it will burn fat, right? That's the terminology. It gives you that perception, but it's a little misleading. Actually, if you're exercising to lose weight, which a lot of people are, that comes down to actually the number of calories you burn. So I'm just going to read this to you. It's true that in the fat burn zone, you'll burn more stored fats as your main energy source. So when you're in zones 1 and 2, you'll be burning more fat, stored fat, but your total caloric burn during that time is actually very minimal. When you exercise in a cardio zone, those are zones 3 and up, you'll burn more glycogen or stored carbs as your main energy source using less fat. Nevertheless, your total caloric burn is much higher. And remember, calories burned is what results in losing weight loss. Okay. So that's why people who understand that actually focus more on cardio workouts when they're actually trying to lose weight. And they steer their workout calendar over the week. When you create your workout calendar and you add all those levels of intensity and varying intensity, they might focus more on getting themselves in zones 3 and 4 during the week of workouts. And it doesn't mean you have a longer workout. It just refers to the level of intensity. Because remember, we're talking about how high your heart rate gets. So the takeaway here is that you need to train in all the zones. That's what's important, which comes with total body conditioning, cross training, and program stacking, exercising with intention, guys. So glad you're here, because following all of my methods and strategies will naturally take you through all of those zones as you're doing your workouts on our workout calendar. For me, I think the easiest way to hit all the zones is using I didn't come up with it, but it's a common way of deciding what zone you're in or calculating what zone you're in without actually having a heart rate monitor on and looking at your heart rate number itself. And that's by using perceived exertion. So perceived exertion is just you perceiving how exerted you are, right? I know it sounds crazy, but yes, it is. Your perceived exertion. And the best way to do that is actually, we've all heard this, how are you able to communicate? So in zones 1 and 2, especially zone 1, you should still be able to carry on a conversation. As you move into zone 2, you're going to be winded. And then those are the fat burning zones. You're still going to be able to talk in zone 2, but a little more winded. As you move into zones 3 and 4 and start hitting into that cardio zone, it's going to start to get much harder to carry on a conversation. And that's how you perceive that you've entered into, leveled up into the cardio zone. So for me, that's a much smarter, more practical, and easier way to calculate what zone you're actually in. And it's different for everybody, right? And it's different based on your genetics. It's different based on your baseline health. It's different. There's lots of factors that go into this. You need to focus on you, though, your numbers and your perceived exertion and your fitness level. That's what it's all about. So one last thing. I said I was going to touch on heart rate monitors. So I want to do that. Most of them are all incredibly inaccurate, is the truth of the matter. So if you're walking around with your smartwatch on, your Apple Watch, and it's telling you what your heart rate is for most of the day, it may or may not be, it's definitely not 100% accurate. I'll tell you that right now. Does that mean you shouldn't even look at it? No, of course not. You can look at it. But if you're working out, I would not use anything that's taking your radial pulse. That's that pulse at your wrist. If it's monitoring your radial pulse, it's just not as accurate. Those devices tend to move around, they shift, they lose the tracking ability of your pulse. It's just not super accurate. The best way to get an accurate heart rate is to wear a heart rate monitor that pairs with a chest strap. So we've all seen pictures of exercise physiology labs having a guy on a treadmill and he's running, and there's all this equipment surrounding him and doctors in lab coats and people with clipboards, and they're watching him and they're writing down data. Well, what is he wearing to monitor his heart rate? It's a chest strap, right? And that's how they most accurately are getting his heart rate. And so that is actually the best device you can buy. It's harder to find them these days. Unfortunately, everybody's gotten away from them because it's just so practical to put on, to claim that watch is doing as good a job, but it's just not. So if you really, really want to get down and dirty, get your accurate numbers, you're going to need a chest strap that's paired with your watch. That's what I wear. I know Polar still sells them. And a lot of the heart rate monitors will pair with the chest strap, even if you buy the chest strap separately. You just have to do your research. There's so many out there on the market. Garmin has some. Polar for sure has some. That's what I do. When I'm reviewing programs, I always wear a heart rate monitor with a chest strap, because I like to report how many calories I burn when I do the workouts, and I try to be as accurate as possible. Now, how many calories I burn, it's Your calorie burn is calculated to your heart rate during the workout and where you are in those zones. That's how those numbers come up for people. So if you want to see the number of calories burned and you really want a good picture of what heart rate zone you're in when you work out, I recommend that you invest in a heart rate monitor with a chest strap. Otherwise, use perceived exertion. Just depends on what your goal is, what kind of information you're trying to gather. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions.